Hi class, I wanted to make a video to kind of help out with factoring, especially now that we're getting into solving by factoring. We've gone over some rules, and so it's very important that you have these written down. You do not have to memorize them, so just make sure you have them. So I want to go through the 5 different ways that we can factor, and we're going to do examples for each one. So the first one is difference of squares. And so notice the problem has to be set up as some sort of number or variable squared minus another some sort of variable or number squared. So the difference part is that it's going to be a subtraction in between, and we have to have some sort of squared with another squared, okay? So we're going to do a problem like that in a minute. We also have factors of sum and difference of cubes. Kind of the same idea here. We need to have, for the sum, we need to have some sort of number or variable cubed plus some sort of number or variable cubed. Once it's set up in this form at the beginning, then you just plug in A and B into this formula right here, this rule. Okay, very similar is the difference of squares. Instead of addition, it's subtraction. But we do, again, have to have an A cubed, so some sort of number or variable cubed, minus a B cubed. Again, B is some sort of number or variable cubed. So we'll do a couple problems of each of those. The last two that we have trinomials, which is kind of treated just like our quadratics. And so there's different ways that we can do that with the AC method. If the leading coefficient, so the number that's in front, if it is greater than 1, then we can actually start to use the AC method. And then before we finish the AC method, we go into grouping. And so grouping is the last one. So I did pick a problem where we're going to start the AC method and then finish it by grouping, though, just because it's a little easier. And so then the last one is just strictly grouping. Okay, so these are the problems that I want to do with you real quick. So the first one we're going to do is the difference of squares. And so you'll notice that it says x squared minus 16 equals 0. Okay, so I'm going to write that down. X squared minus 16 equals 0. We need this to be set up as a squared minus a b squared, okay? Right now, it's not set up this way, okay? So we need to make sure it is. We do have an a squared, which is an x squared, but this 16 is not set up with a squared. And so that's what we need to work on. So the 16, we need to rewrite this so that it has a squared on it. And so the easiest way to do that is to take the number and square root it. And so in this case, the square root of 16 is 4. This number is then going to be your b. So if I rewrite this, I'll have x squared minus 4 squared. And notice I didn't change the number. 4 times 4 is still 16. So I didn't change this. I just rewrote it so that it was a squared, so that it was set up for the formula. So now I can just plug it into the formula. I have my A and I have my B. And so now my formula is x minus 4 and x plus 4. And then you would set those equal to 0 to solve, is what we're doing later this week. So then you would set each of these equal to 0 and solve, okay? What's important is you can always double check. X times x is x squared. X times 4x is 4x. But then negative 4 times x is a negative 4x. And so those will cancel out. And then the last one is negative 4 times 4, which is a negative 16. Okay, so that was difference of squares. So now let's do one with difference and sum of cubes. Okay, so if we go back to the problems that I picked out, we have sum of cubes. And so again, with sum of cubes, we want it to be set up as some sort of number or variable cubed plus another number or variable cubed. In this case, you'll see that it has 125, which is a whole number. So we've got to make sure we set that up so that it's a cube instead. Okay, in order to do this, the easiest way is to go to your calculator and hit the math button. And you're going to find a little symbol that has a 3 with like a square root. That's called a cube root. If I take the cubed root of 125, that equals 5. What that means is 5 times 5 times 5 is going to be 125. And so I can rewrite this 125 as 5 cubed. And now I also have the x cubed. So now I'm set up to where it looks like the formula. So right here, remember the formula for sum looks like something with a cubed plus b cubed, okay? And then we've got the formula here. So now that I have an a and a b, I can just plug it right into this formula right here. Okay? So my a in this case is x, and my b is 5. Okay? So I have x plus 5. And then you have a squared. A in this case is x, so we'll have x squared, minus a times b. So 5 times x is 5x. And then the last one is b squared, so b times b. In this case, b is 5, so 5 times 5 is 25. If all it's asking for to factor, you'd be done. This would be your factoring right here. If you have to solve, you would set each of those equal to 0. This one's kind of easy. X plus 5 equals 0. We just move it over and we find out x is negative 5. However, this piece you would need to plug into the quadratic formula. Okay, so once you plug this into the quadratic formula, you could then solve for your 2 x's there. Okay, I'm not going to go ahead and do that because I wanted to just focus on factoring in this video. But if you're still having trouble with quadratic formula, please let me know and I can help you out. Okay, so that is sum of cubes. Difference of cubes is very, very similar. Okay, so we're now going to do difference of cubes. Remember, right here, it's got to be set up as something cubed minus something else cubed. Once it's set up correctly, then you just plug it into this formula, this rule right here. So I did decide to pick one that was a little bit harder, okay? So in this case, there's numbers in front of both. In order for us to make sure that that is a cubed, you need to take these numbers and put them in the calculator under math. So remember, go under math and find the little button that looks like this 3 with a square root, which is called a cubed root. We're going to take the cube root of 27, and you'll find out that that is 3. That means 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. So we're going to change this to a 3x cubed. Okay? And so that means if I were to distribute that cubed back, it'd be 3 times 3 times 3, which is the 27, and x times x times x, which is also x cubed. Okay, so that's how we changed it. We're also going to change this 64. So if you take the cubed root of 64, you'll find out that it's 4. So 4 cubed. That means 4 times 4, which is 16. 16 times 4 is 64. So now it's written like the formula, where there's something cubed minus something else cubed. And so this inside piece, the whole thing, the 3x is your A, and the inside here is your B. And so if I follow the formula, it's A minus B. So in this case, it's 3x minus 4. And then it's A squared. Now that's a little harder because we have 3x times 3x. So 3x times 3x is actually going to be a 9x squared. Okay. And then the next part is A times B. So in this case, we have 3x times 4. So it's going to be a positive 12x. And then the final step is b squared. In this case, b is 4, so 4 times 4 is 16. If all it asked for you to do is to factor, you would be done. This yellow box right here would be your answer. If you need to solve, you would set each of those equal to 0. So this first one isn't as bad. You just set it equal to 0 and solve for x. However, this second parenthesis, you would need to set it up through the quadratic formula and solve for x using the quadratic formula. I'm not going to do that in this video. If you still need help with quadratic formula, then please come see me and we'll do it, okay? But you should end up with 2 answers for quadratic formula plus the third answer here. So you'll have 3 answers when you're solving. Okay, so let's go to trinomials. Okay, remember trinomials look like a quadratic. So even though this says x to the 4th, because it goes from 4, 2 to nothing, we can treat it like a quadratic. So it's 2x to the 4th plus 9x squared minus 18 equals 0. So again, we can start by doing this by setting up the AC method. And I picked one where A is not 1 so that you could also use grouping after you do the AC method. So the first thing you want to do is A times C. So in this case, you have a negative 18 times 2. And so that's going to give me a negative 36. Okay. I want to find 2 numbers that when I multiply them together, I get the negative 36. But when I add them together, I'm going to get a positive 9. Okay. And so that gives me, if I do a positive 12 and a negative 3, that'll give me the negative 36. But when I add those, I'm going to get a positive 9. Now, if you feel comfortable continuing with the AC method, you can. However, an easier way, especially because we are dealing with a 4th power, is we are going to replace this middle term, the 9x squared, with the 2 factors you just found. So we're going to split the b. Okay? So if I rewrite this, it's going to be 2x to the 4th, and I'm going to split the b. So I'm going to have a positive 12x squared, a negative 3x, and that minus 18. I'm now going to take this green box and continue by grouping. Okay, so grouping is the last one we're doing. And so with grouping, you treat it as 2 separate problems. You're going to take the first 2 terms and the last 2 terms. So in this case, the first 2 terms are here, and the last 2 terms are here. With the first 2 terms, we want to find a greatest common factor. So in this case, the greatest common factor is 2x squared. If I divide both of these terms by 2x squared, I'm left with x squared plus 6. And that was the green part. This red part, I want to find a greatest common factor. And so in this case, I can take out a negative 3. If I take a negative 3 out, I'm left with x plus 6. If you do grouping correct, these 2 will always be the same. And so what I can do now is I can take that and I can divide the x plus, that should be an x squared, I'm sorry, right here, x squared. So I'm going to divide by an x squared plus 6. So that's going to come in the front. If I divide those out, I'm left with 2x squared here. If I divide it out here, I'm left with a minus 3. So I've now factored those. And then you can set those up and solve, set them equal to 0 and solve, okay? But this is a trinomial that I was able to split up the B, and then I was able to do grouping. Okay, and then from there you can just solve. Let's do one more grouping where it's not a trinomial. So the last example I gave over here is it's got 4 terms, and I cannot take out a greatest common factor from all 4 of those. Like there's no greatest common factor that goes into all 4 of those. And so that gives us another sign that it's going to be grouping. Okay, so I'm just going to write it down real quick. And so this one should go a little faster because we just did grouping. So again, grouping, we're going to take the first 2 terms and group those together, and we're going to take the last 2 terms and group those 2 together. So in the first 2 terms, the only thing they have in common is an x squared. If I do x to the third divided by x squared, I have 1x left. If I do negative 4x squared divided by x squared, I have a negative 4 left. And then the second set of terms, I'm going to see what they have in common. And in this case, they have a 5 in common. 5x divided by 5 is x. Negative 20 divided by x is a negative 4. Again, if you do grouping correctly, then these 2 are going to be the same. So I'm now going to divide both of these by x minus 4. And so that x minus 4 comes out in the front. And I'm factoring it out, and so I'm left with x squared plus 5. And again, we'd be done with factoring here, but if we had to solve, then we would set this one equal to 0, and then we would set this one equal to 0 and solve for x's. So those are the different ways that we can factor. Again, it's very important that you write the rules down. You do not have to memorize them, but it'll help you identify which one to use. Okay, so we have difference of squares. It's when you can set it up with some sort of squared minus another some sort of squared. Sum and difference of cubes, some sort of cubed plus or minus another set of cubed. Trinomials, we can kind of treat those like quadratics, and so we were able to start with the AC method, and in this case, since A was not 1, it was easier to split the B and to do grouping. And then the last one is just grouping itself, okay? So please, the goal is to try and recognize which one you're going to use on which problem, and that way you can successfully solve for X this week. Okay, talk to you later.